my book and wax friends. I'm Amber. Welcome to my channel. I post about all sorts of bookish and home fragrance content. And today's video is a more positive video than my last book video. It is my favorite books of 2024. My last one was my most disappointing of 2024, but I like to be positive and have a positive outlook. And so I much prefer to talk about things like my favorites. So let's jump into it. I have 13 technically books for you guys. The 13th is kind of an honorable mention because it leads into maybe some other books on the list, but they were 4 stars for me. It is a series, so I am including all 3 in this. It is the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. And look at this beautiful edition. If you did not see my other book where I featured these, my book haul a few months back, these are from Acrylic Prints, and aren't they just stunning? And they all go together to create the carousel. So pretty. So Caraval, Legendary, and Finale are the 3 books in the series, and then Spectacular, which I do have over there, I can't reach it right now, is a holiday novella that just came out. So these books are like an honorable mention. The first book in the series was a 3-star for me, but I continued, and Legendary and Finale were 4 stars for me. They take place in a fantasy world. It is a game that these 2 sisters end up going to try and make their lives better because they live with a father who's abusive. And so they end up getting invited to this contest where if they win, they get to have 1 wish, I think it is, from what I remember. So they are fun books. I did really enjoy them. They give you that magical, whimsical quality that I love. If I had to pick a favorite of the 3, Legendary, the second book is probably my favorite, mainly because of a certain someone that shows up in that one, and he's a favorite character of mine, which we may or may not talk about later. Okay, moving on. The number 12 spot goes to A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So I did just read this in the month of December, so I will go into more detail about that with my December wrap up. Love this one. It was great. I'm very familiar with the story from the various version, Disney version, Muppets version, the regular versions. There's so many different versions of the Christmas Carol, but I had never read it. And so I read it and I loved it. I thought it was great. 4.5 stars for me. About a man named Ebenezer Scrooge. He's a miser. He is not a nice person. And he ends up getting visited by ghosts on Christmas Eve and turns his life around. So, A Christmas Carol. Then the next one, I do not have the book on me. It is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And this one is a story, it's a historical fantasy about this girl. I think her name was Inez, if I'm remembering right. She's from Argentina. Her parents are, Her parents are archaeologists, and this takes place in the 1800s. And her parents are archaeologists and are always off in Egypt with Inez's uncle, who is also an archaeologist, trying to dig up archaeological things in Egypt. And there is magical elements in some of the things they dig up. So there is, like I said, it's historical fantasy, so there are some magic elements in the book. So she ends up getting word that her parents supposedly have died, but she doesn't know how or why or what happened, just that they're supposedly, they passed away. And so she, on her own, decides to go to Egypt and figure out what's going on. So I loved it. I thought it was great. Not a 5-star for me. I can't remember what I rated it, but it was at least a 4-star. I think maybe 4.25, something like that. The banter between Inez and the male main character, he was great. What was his name? Whitford something or other. He was English. Their banter with each other was so fun. And there were a lot of twists in this one, and the ending of this one made me want the book right away, and I did not realize it hadn't come out yet at the time. I'm still waiting for it from the library. It is out now. That is What the Library Hides, is the second book, and I think it's just supposed to be a duology. But it's great. It's fun if you're looking for a good historical fantasy type of book that has a lot of fun banter, a wonderful Egyptian mummy type of background. This book is a great one. So that is number 11 for me. Number 10 has to go to The 7-Year Slip. This is by Ashley Poston. It is a romance. And with her books, there usually is like a magical realism element to her books. And this got a 4.75 from me, I think, if I'm remembering right. The story is about this girl who loses her aunt, who she was super close to. Her aunt ends up passing away, and the aunt leaves her this apartment for her to inherit and live in. And the apartment has this like time jump element to it, but you never know when it's going to happen, and she doesn't know when it's going to happen. She just knows that it does happen, so she keeps on waiting for it. She has never had it happen to herself, like during the time she was with her aunt or anything like that. It had never happened to her, but her aunt would tell her about it, and so she did believe that it would happen, and then it wasn't happening for her after she inherited it, and so she stopped believing. And then one day a guy shows up in her apartment, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And she freaks out at first, and then realizes this is a guy from 7 years ago. So the time slip is like 7 years is always the distance in time. So he's from 7 years in the past. And it's about what happens in the apartments between them, their relationship in the past, her in the past then, but when you go outside of the apartment, it's no longer the past. She's back in the present type of thing. And so it has some past and present elements to it. It's a sweet love story. I did really enjoy it. There was a lot of good depth to the characters. Some real heartfelt moments in regards to her aunt. And I didn't give it a 5-star just because there was a little more content than I like. And so that takes me out of the story when it has a lot of language and a little bit of open door scenes. So it took me out of the story a little more. If it had been a little less in those regards, it would have gotten a 5-star for me. So if those things don't bother you at all, I'm sure if you read that story, it'll be a 5-star. Not that I can guarantee it. We all have different tastes, but I do highly recommend that one. So that is The 7-Year Slip. Then number 9 is The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love, which is by India Holton. It is a romantic historical romantic fantasy. It's probably how I would categorize it. And it is about a girl that is an ornithologist. She's a professor. It takes place in England mainly. She is a professor at either Oxford or Cambridge. The other character, the male main character, love interest character, is from the other professor from the other school. So it's one or the other. And she ends up deciding to enter, there's like this contest that comes out. So she decides to catch this bird, and the birds in the world are magical. There's regular birds too, but there are magical birds too. And there is this rare magical bird. Whoever catches the bird ends up getting prestige and awards and money and tenure at their school if they're a professor. Sorry guys, just 1 second. Excuse me for that. So, what was I saying? The professor ends up trying to find this bird along with, it seems like, half the country, so that she can win all these accolades. Well, her nemesis, the other professor, he ends up wanting to find the bird too. And through different hijinks, they end up kind of teaming up. And there were lots of laugh out loud moments in this. And their banter with each other was great. She reminded me a little bit of Emily Wilde from, if you're familiar with the Emily Wilde, what's the first book called? Encyclopedia of Fairy, the series. Except she wasn't like gruff and curmudgeonly, the main character in this book, but she was that same kind of introverted, doesn't know how to socialize with people. She was just very like a doormat, let everyone kind of walk all over her type of thing instead. So it was a fun story, lots of hijinks, lots of fun things that happened and made me laugh. The love story between the two ended up being perfect, I felt like, and it was just a fun, overall good time. It didn't get a 5-star because a little bit of content in it, not a lot, but it was close to 5-star for me. So that is The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. And her second book is coming out in the series this coming May, I think it is. And that is The Geographer's Map to something or other. Something like that. And that's about the male main character from this one, his cousin, and a story about his cousin and what happens with that one. So it looks fun too. Okay, the number 8 spot has to go to Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. And this was actually a reread for me this year. I read it for the first time in 2023. But I read it again because the second book in the series did come out in November. Pretty sure it was November. It might have been the end of October. I'm still waiting from the library for it. It hasn't come in yet, and I'm anxiously waiting for it for sure. So the Assistant to the Villain, the Assistant to the Villain. I'm getting mixed up with what the second one's called. But this first one is Assistant to the Villain. It is about a girl named Evie, and she has lost her job because of reasons that you find out in the book. And so she's trying to find another job because she's pretty much the breadwinner for her family because her dad gets super sick all the time. He has some sort of like fever that makes him bedridden a lot of the time. And then she's got a little sister that's like 10 years younger than her. So she's down on her luck trying to find a job, hasn't been able to find anything. She almost had a job, went to a job fair. And this is kind of like a fantasy world that's like medieval in nature, so to speak. She went to this job fair, had a job, but then someone else gave her a sob story and she felt bad, and so she let this other person have the job instead. So she's down on her luck, feeling bummed about that, walking through the woods, and ends up coming across blood, and she thinks, oh, there's some wounded animal, let me go see if it's okay, if it needs help. And she ends up coming across what's not an animal, but what is the villain, and he is like the arch nemesis of the king of the kingdom, and he's being hunted. He's wounded and is being hunted. So she ends up, because she's with them, he says, if the king's guards find you with me, you're going to be killed too. And so she runs off with him, and through the process, he finds out she's not employed anymore. And so after they're escaping, he offers her a job as his assistant. So his whole villainy is kind of almost like The Office. So he's like the CEO of this almost like company in regards to villainy. And it's just a fun book. Evie's like sunshine, and the villain, of course, is very grumpy. The banter in it is really fun. And again, it has that The Office type of vibes to the atmosphere, the work atmosphere. And then there's this mystery involved as well. And there seems to be someone trying to sabotage the villain and what's happening in regards to him trying to get back at the king for some stuff that happened in the past. And so they're trying to figure out who the mole is and that sort of thing. It's a fun book. I really enjoyed it. It was light. It had a cozy type of element to it as well. The banter, again, I'm one for a good banter in a story, and Evie and the villains banter with each other was always so fun. I really enjoyed it. And so, yeah, that is Assistant to the Villain, and it gets my number 8 spot. Number 7 has to go to Hello Stranger by Katherine Center. I think this did get a 5-star or 4.75, something like that. It was very close to 5-star. Yeah, I don't think I give it 5-star because I still like The Bodyguard book better, which I guess I shouldn't compare it. I should just rate it on its own. So it's 5-star or 4.75. It's really good. So it's about this girl who gets in this accident, and from the accident, she ends up finding out that she has some sort of condition that she gets surgery for, and from the surgery she ends up with what they hope is temporary face blindness, which is actually a condition that she can look up at a person and can't recognize their faces. Katherine Center did a really good job at kind of like explaining what that entails for someone. So she would see like parts of a person's face, like the nose, but it was like kind of jumbled, I would say, like a Picasso painting sort of thing. And what was really hard for the main character in regards to this is she's a portrait painter. That is her job. And she just got entered into this contest. She's she needs money because she's kind of living in squalor and struggling as an artist, of course. And she ends up getting entered, making the finalists in this painting contest that has to do with portraits. And now she has this condition that may or may not be temporary. And she only has, I don't know how long, a couple months or something to get this painting done and entered. And so it's her trying to figure things out in regards to that. She ends up meeting this guy who ends up helping her, who also lives in the apartments that she lives in. And she comes to be really good friends with this guy. There's some kind of mistaken identity things that happens, obviously, especially with her not being able to see people's faces. And there's a love triangle too, because she thinks she's in love, or she has feelings for this veterinarian that she takes her dog to. And so it's cute. It's a very cute book, and I really enjoyed it. Katherine Center is a good one if you're like me, that doesn't like open door type of scenes. She writes closed door romance, and it was very cute. I did really enjoy it. So that is Hello Stranger in the number 7 spot. Number 6 is a duology. I put them both at number 6. It is the Shepherd King duology. The first book is One Dark Window. The second book is Two Twisted Crowns. I read both of them this year within a couple month time span. Last month, November, I read the final book, Two Twisted Crowns, and they are by Rachel Gillig, and it is a fantasy series. Great series. I really enjoyed it. Of the two, the second book is my favorite, but I did really enjoy the first one. The main story is about a girl named Elspeth. She lives in this fantasy world in this town called Blunder. They are surrounded by woods, and there's this mist, this like deadly mist that if you get lost in, you end up going crazy. There's this like fever that ends up, if you get it, you end up with some sort of magical ability usually, and if you do, you can end up going crazy or dying from the magical ability. Not only that, the king will kill you if you end up coming down with the fever and end up with a magical ability. He kills those that end up with magic. Well, not only that, there is another form of magic that is okay to have, and they are in the form of these cards. And each card gives you a different ability. And there's only so many cards. Each type of card has a different amount of cards in it. So there's like, I can't even remember any of the names of the cards. I don't remember. I don't remember any of them. But all of the cards have a different amount depending on what card it is. The final card, there's only one of. And, you know, up to, I think the one that has the most cards is like 12. So the higher ups, of course, are usually the ones that end up with one of the cards. So the magic system was very unique. I did really enjoy it. I loved the characters in it. Elspeth was a great character. You come to find out in the first book from her, she ends up getting in the fever as a kid. And from that, she ends up with an ability that puts, he's called the Nightmare, like in her head. So she hears this other character in her head. And the dynamic between the two of them is fantastic. I really loved the Nightmare. He was great. The second book, you are further on in the story, of course. And in that, I'm not going to spoil anything. I don't want to spoil anything, but you actually get like dual POVs in that one. And I really enjoyed that because I did really enjoy the other character that you got a point of view from that you didn't really get in the first book. And I liked the storyline that went along with that. I liked both of them, but the second book is my favorite if I had to pick one out of the two. But I did really enjoy both. So that is the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig. Highly recommend those. Then the 5th spot, we're moving into my full-on 5-star reviews or 5-star books for the year. This is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaffer, and this came out I think last year because she has her second book out this year, The Lost Story. This is, a lot of people tout it as magical realism. There's no magical realism in it. Drives me nuts when people say there is, but there isn't. There's no sort of magical elements in it. It's kind of whimsical in feel, but there's no actual like magic fantasy in it. That being said, it is about a girl who is a teacher assistant. She's not a teacher, she's an assistant, an aide at an elementary school. And she ends up fostering at the beginning. Well, you don't find out exactly at the beginning, but there's this little boy who she for a minute fostered before it was like an emergency foster. and he spent a little time with her, a few days, before he was being placed with an actual foster family. Well, she wants to adopt him, but she doesn't have the money. And so, come to find out, her favorite author from when she was a childhood, he wrote the Clockwork Island books, is the series that he is famous for. And he's like worldwide, like super famous type of thing. J.K. Rowling, famous. And all of a sudden, 7 years beforehand, he stopped writing the series. And he had like scads of books. He stopped, and no one knew what happened. He owns this island off the coast of New York or Massachusetts or Maine or something like that on the East Coast. And he, all of a sudden, you hear from him, and he offers this contest for a few people that he sends invites to win his latest manuscript for the next, and I think final, it's supposed to be the final book in the Clockwork Island series. I can't remember for sure though if it's the final. So the main character, I'm pretty sure her name was Lucy. I don't know if I said that already. She ends up getting an invitation. So think Willy Wonka-esque. It has those kind of elements, or it's inspired kind of by Willy Wonka, but again, there's no actual like fantasy elements. There's no magical realism in this. So she gets invited to try and win this contest, which she's like, this is like an answer to my prayers, so I can adopt this little boy who feels like a son to me. And so it's all about that. There is a romance to the story as well, but it's not like the main element of the story. This was very heartfelt. It had some great descriptions of the island. You get to know the backstory of what happened with Lucy, or whatever her name is, and what happened to her as a child. And it's just wonderful. It made me cry. Usually if a book makes me cry, it's like an automatic 5 stars. I know it's going to be a 5-star read for me, and it was. I know there are some people that did kind of have issues in regards to the main character's relationship with this little boy, the little student, because she pretty much was mothering to him and kind of was like, we're going to be adopted. You do find out through the rest of the book. She doesn't, what had happened to this poor little boy, and she doesn't want to make things worse for him. Not saying I agree with how she reacted, how she acted towards him when she couldn't really promise him for sure that she could adopt him, but I could see why she didn't want to cause more trauma, I guess, even though eventually it would have been trauma if it didn't work out, obviously. So I can see why that would be an issue for some people, and I completely understand. But I love the little boy. He was the sweetest little guy, and I really felt for him and for Lucy in the story. Her backstory was very sad, but anyway, so I do recommend this book for sure. 5 stars for me. That is The Wishing Game by Meg Shaffer. I was about to pause it, and I have no reason to pause it. Okay, number 4 is actually a middle grade, and this is The Miraculous Life. Oh, no, I always want to say life. The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. And I loved this book. It had been on my TBR for quite a while. I'm not sure. I can't remember when it came out exactly. But it is about this toy rabbit. And he's like this porcelain, like fancy toy. He has like a squishy body and porcelain like limbs and head. Very fancy, elegant rabbit. And this little girl loves him. And he is very self-centered at the beginning, and she ends up losing him, and it's all about his journey through the world and how love endures and how he realizes that there's more to life than just yourself. And it's gonna make me tear up now. It's a great book. I highly recommend it, even if you are not a middle schooler, which I am not a middle schooler. Highly, highly recommend it. And that is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Okay, number 3 is the 7th book in the Invisible Library series. There are 8 books, and it is The Dark Archive by Genevieve Cogman. And I love this one, you guys. If you don't know what the Invisible Library is, it is a fantasy series, or it's a sci-fi fantasy, I guess, because there's kind of like time travel elements to it. About the Invisible Library, which is this place that kind of keeps balance between the different worlds. So there are different versions of worlds. And Irene, the main character, is a librarian from the Invisible Library. And so her job as a librarian is to go collect unique books from different versions of the world that helps to stabilize the worlds. If the library has the book, it stabilizes the worlds. Well, in these worlds, there are also dragons who are on the side of order, and there are fae who are on the side of chaos. And they hate each other, obviously. Now, some worlds that she goes to are very high in order, so dragons have really deep control of those worlds, and some might be super high in chaos, and so the fae have more control over that. And the library is trying to bring balance to all of them, because too much chaos or too much order leads to destruction. Is pretty much what it comes down to. So Irene, at the beginning of all the series, that's her job. And then she gets teamed up with a guy named Kai. And then you meet other characters throughout the series too that become part of the ragtag team. And this 7th book, like I said, second to last book, so a lot happened in it, and I really, really adored it. And I still haven't gotten around to reading the final book, but I'm planning on it as one of my 25 books in 2025. Stay tuned for that list. That one is one of the ones on the list because I do want to finish the series. It's been such a fun series so far. Highly, highly recommend it. Okay, the number 2 spot goes to Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. And this is in the Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairy trilogy. I think it's going to be a trilogy. The final book comes out in 2025. This is by Heather Fawcett. Loved the second book. I did really enjoy the first book. It started out pretty slow for me. But then it picked up and I really loved it. Well, I loved the first one from the beginning, probably because I was more, I knew the characters by that point in time, obviously. So this is about Emily Wilde, who is a professor at one of the colleges in England, Oxford, possibly Cambridge, something like that. And they live in a world that has fairies. And she is a professor that studies fairies. And so she is trying to write an encyclopedia about all the various species of fairies. And so in the first book, she goes off to this island way up in the north countries where it's rumored to have these very rare species of fairies. And she needs to have that information for her encyclopedia. So it's all about what happens with that, and it's very cozy. So it's a cozier type of fantasy series, but still a lot of things do happen. So it's not like there aren't super, super high stakes. I feel like there's more high stakes in the second book than there is in the first, and maybe that's another reason why I like the second book a little bit more. But in the second book, you're continuing on with Emily and her another professor who is in the first book too. His name is Bambleby, Wendell Bambleby, and he's kind of the opposite of Emily in as far as temperament and stuff goes. So Emily is very, as I talked about earlier, she's very like reserved, analytical, curmudgeonly a little bit. She doesn't understand like social cues. She's like, give me my books, I don't want to deal with people type of person. And Bambleby is like the opposite. And so you have that banter between them. Again, I love a book with good banter. It's some of my favorite elements of a book. And you get all those whimsical fantasy elements too. And like I said, they're cozy. They have that cozy element as well. So if you're looking for a good, like cozy, like wintry type read, I do highly recommend this series. It is the perfect time of year to read them for sure. So Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands gets the number 2 spot. Okay, number 1. This probably, if you've been watching my videos for ever since I read these this year, you probably won't be surprised at all by what gets number 1 for me. Stephanie Garber's Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. I read these, all 3 of these in like a month's time. Like, when was this? April, I think. I think I read Once Upon a Broken Heart in April, and then I read the next 2, The Ballad of Never After and A Curse for True Love in May. If I'm remembering right, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So this is a continuation of the Caraval. Oh, it's not a really continuation, I shouldn't say. It's like a spin-off series of Caraval. And a character that is in Caraval is one of the main characters in this series. And it takes place in a fantasy world. And if you're looking for whimsical, magic, wonderful time, these books are for you. I love them so much. And it is about a girl named Evangeline Fox. And at the beginning of the first book, so there's kind of a little bit of overlap from the beginning of the first book with what happens in the final book of the Caraval trilogy. Why can't I remember the finale? There's a little bit of overlap at the very beginning of this one, but then it goes on after all that. And so Evangeline Fox, she's in love with this guy. They were boyfriend and a girlfriend, and all of a sudden he dumps her and is engaged to be married to her stepsister. And she's like, he must be cursed because this kind of came out of nowhere. And so she ends up going to the Temple of the Prince of Hearts, who is, supposed to be kind of over love and lost love and sort of thing. So she finds his temple and goes to ask for help with stopping the wedding because she believes that her guy is cursed. And so she wants to break the curse and stop the wedding. So it starts from there, and then lots of stuff happens. She ends up journeying to the place that's called the Magnificent North, helping the empress of the country she's from, Volenda, I think is what it's called, something like that. And she goes to the Magnificent North, which is the country north of where she lives. And it's fun. It's whimsical. It's got an awesome love story, and I adore it. My favorite of the 3, if I had to pick one, is probably the second book, again, The Ballad of Never After. And I did actually give 5 stars to A Curse for True Love. This was kind of controversial for people. A lot of people did not love this one. I still loved it. I loved the way it ended. I do agree it should have been longer, I feel, and less from a point of view of someone that you get a point of view from in this one. I didn't mind that we had some point of view from this person that I was not a fan of, but you're not really supposed to like him, which is why you get the point of view from him, I feel like. Or I shouldn't even said him. Sorry, now you know. But we should have had less, I feel like, point of view from this person and more from a different character. I don't want to spoil anything. But even saying all that, I still loved it. I love the way it wrapped up. And I'm really, really hoping that we get a little novella from these, because it was kind of hinted at with the Spectacular novella, which is the holiday novella that just came out for the Caraval series. At the end of that is kind of hinted at that we may get a novella, and I'm very excited. I hope we do. So anyway, that is my number one. And again, it's a trilogy, but I love all three. So that's my number one of my favorite books for 2024. Tell me down in the comments, what are some books that you really loved for 2024? What do you think of my list? If you've read any of these, like I said, I know A Curse for True Love was controversial. This is for a lot of people, they didn't like it, but I loved it still. So yeah, let me know those things down in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'm not sure when this is going up, but we are getting close to New Year's. So I just want to say Happy New Year's to all of you. Thank you for spending some time with me. Until next time, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.